Imagine you own like a local delivery business, right? You've got a small fleet of, say, 5 trucks,
Mm-hmm.
and you wake up on a Tuesday, and overnight, the sign at the corner gas station has ticked up by just 40 cents.
Which doesn't sound like a lot to most people.
Right, exactly. To the average driver commuting to an office, it's just a mild annoyance. Maybe you skip a coffee that morning, make up for it. But to you, running those 5 trucks all day, your business just lost $5,000 in profit for the month before the sun even came up.
Yeah, it is a brutal reality check. And it really exposes how fragile the foundation of a seemingly stable business really is when it relies on something as completely unpredictable as global energy markets.
Yeah, because that predictability is what business models are actually built on, you know? Like you sign a lease, you know exactly what your building costs every single month for the next 3 years. It's a fixed number.
Exactly.
But then you step into the world of fuel costs and
Right.
suddenly you're trying to build a house on quicksand. The expense landscape is just constantly shifting under your feet.
And, we tend to view paying for gas as this highly localized pain. Like, it hurts our own wallet in that specific moment at the pump. We pay a little more, we grumble, we drive away.
Right.
We rarely consider the broader mechanics at play.
Which is exactly what we're doing for you today. Welcome to the deep dive. We're pulling from a really fascinating article today titled Fuel Volatility and Its Economic Toll on Business.
It's a great read.
It really is. And our mission here isn't just to, complain about the numbers on the sign. We want to map out the invisible domino effect that starts the very second that fuel is burned in an engine.
Right. We're going to trace how a spike in diesel doesn't just make shipping more expensive. It fundamentally alters the menu at your neighborhood restaurant. It physically redraws the local job market, and it ultimately forces the hands of the most powerful central banks in the world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting right at the source, which is the very first domino to fall, logistics. And the immediate violent reality of moving physical things from point A to point B, it's less like a ripple in a pond and more like turning up the gravity on a planet.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Right.
Suddenly every single movement, whether it's moving a pallet of goods, driving a tractor, delivering a package, it just requires significantly more energy and money. The entire system just gets heavier.
And that gravity hits the transportation sector first. I mean, if your business is moving freight, fuel is your lifeblood.
Oh.
The source text highlights that when prices jump, fleet operators are suddenly staring down massive, massive monthly deficits.
Right.
And they have to adapt within days, not months. So you see this immediate, frantic scramble for route optimization. And it goes far beyond just telling drivers, hey, take the highway.
Well, give me a sense of what that optimization actually looks like on the ground. Like, how granular does it get?
Oh, incredibly granular. What's fascinating here is that logistics companies use these advanced algorithms to map out routes that eliminate almost every single unnecessary left turn.
Left turns. Wait, why left turns specifically?
Because making a left turn across traffic usually requires a truck to sit at a traffic light or, wait for an opening. And when a heavy diesel truck is idling, it is burning fuel at 0 miles per gallon.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah, it's pure financial loss. The software also analyzes topographic data. It tracks elevation changes because routing a heavy truck over a steep hill burns drastically more fuel than taking a slightly longer but much flatter route around the hill.
That is wild.
They are literally trying to shave fractions of a gallon off every single delivery just to survive the week.
It's an absolute fight for margins. And, here is where I really feel for the smaller operations. Because the massive corporations, the giant logistics networks, they have tools to fight this.
Exactly.
To use an analogy, it's like trying to bail water out of a sinking boat. A massive corporate fleet has an industrial pump. They can absorb it. But a local food truck or a mobile pet groomer or like a landscaping company, they just have a thimble. They sink a lot faster when that wave hits.
Yeah, the structural vulnerability of small to mid-sized businesses in this scenario is just profound. Like large airlines or massive shipping conglomerates, they can literally buy a financial contract today that locks in tomorrow's gas prices.
Right. A fuel future.
Exactly, a fuel future. It acts as a financial shield against sudden spikes. If the global price of oil doubles next month, the airline doesn't care. They already locked in their price 6 months ago.
So they basically bought certainty.
Yes.
But the local landscaper cannot call up Wall Street and buy a fuel future for his 3 pickup trucks.
No, he is completely exposed to whatever the sign at the station says that morning. He pays the spot price. And because he operates in a competitive local market, he cannot easily pass those costs on.
Right, because you can't just double the price of a lawnmower overnight. The homeowner will just go into the garage, dust off their own mower, and cut the grass themselves.
Which means every single cent that gas goes up comes directly out of the landscaper's own pocket. It creates this terrifying margin squeeze. And the source points out that this leads directly to scaled-back operations, immediate staff cuts, and permanent closures. They simply run out of oxygen. Like you said, they cannot bail the water fast enough with that thimble.
So the small guys take the hit, and sometimes they just go under. But what about the businesses that do try to pass those costs on?
Right.
Let's say a local retailer or restaurant owner decides, hey, I have to survive. I am raising my prices to cover my delivery surcharges. That introduces a completely new problem, right? Setting up our secondary ripple effect.
It does. It leads directly into a standoff between rising business costs and shrinking consumer demand. It is a highly precarious balancing act.
Yeah.
When businesses raise the prices of goods and services to cover their surging logistics costs, they run face first into a consumer base that is suffering from the exact same economic gravity.
Because you and I, the consumers, are also paying more to fill up our personal vehicles just to, commute to work. Our disposable income is shrinking at the exact same moment.
Yeah.
The businesses are asking us to pay more for a burger or a pair of shoes.
And the source actually uses restaurants as a perfect case study for this vulnerability. Imagine your favorite local restaurant. They are getting squeezed on multiple fronts simultaneously.
Okay.
The delivery trucks bringing them their produce and meat are adding massive fuel surcharges to every single invoice. And on top of that, the restaurant's utility bills to keep the lights on and the ovens running, those are rising too because electricity generation is often tied to broader energy markets.
Right. So the baseline cost for that restaurant simply to open its doors each morning has surged.
Exactly.
So they have to reprint the menus. The $15 burger has to become an $18 burger just to maintain the same microscopic profit margin.
But the moment they change that menu, customer foot traffic decreases. The family that used to eat out twice a week scales back to once a week. Or they stop entirely because, well, they need that extra $30 to fill up their minivan. The restaurant is trapped. They are desperately trying to balance preserving their profit margin per meal against the crushing reality of selling far fewer meals overall.
It's a complete trap. And we see this friction happening behind the scenes, too, between the businesses and their suppliers. Like, when gas prices spike, suppliers start acting really defensively. The text mentions they will delay deliveries until they can completely fill a truck, or they'll dramatically raise their minimum order requirements.
Yeah, they do this to justify the cost of turning the ignition key. If sending a half-empty truck costs them money, they simply won't send it.
Right.
But for the business waiting on those goods, it causes massive operational chaos.
I want to pause here really quick because this directly translates to something you, the listener, experience all the time. This is exactly why you suddenly start seeing out-of-stock signs on your favorite niche products at the neighborhood grocery store.
Oh, exactly.
It's not necessarily that the product doesn't exist in a warehouse somewhere. It's that the truck wasn't full enough to justify the fuel cost to drive it to your specific town.
The supply chain just becomes sluggish and rigid, and this forces manufacturers to make some highly counterintuitive decisions.
Like what?
Well, the text notes that because manufacturers are incredibly exposed to the cost of transporting raw materials, some will completely abandon their cheap overseas or cross-country suppliers and seek out closer but significantly pricier local suppliers.
Okay, wait. I really want to push back on this strategy for a second.
Sure.
If a manufacturer moves to a closer but intentionally pricier supplier just to save on freight, aren't they just trading one expense for another? Like, how does a manufacturer justify taking a guaranteed financial hit on raw materials today just to avoid a potential shipping delay tomorrow?
It's a fair question.
That seems like a really tough sell to a CFO who's just looking at a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You are volunteering to pay more for the exact same steel or plastic.
Right. It looks illogical on a simple ledger, but it actually makes deep strategic sense when you factor in the cost of risk. We have to differentiate between pure unit cost and supply chain instability.
Okay, break that down.
Yes, the raw material itself costs a premium from the local supplier, but what the manufacturer is actually purchasing is insurance against idle time.
Okay, so how does that insurance actually pay off?
Well, if your cheaper supplier is 1,000 miles away and fuel prices are extremely volatile, you aren't just risking a higher freight bill, you are risking massive delays because trucking companies are consolidating loads or, ports are backed up.
Right.
If a manufacturer's assembly line has to shut down for 2 days because a delayed shipment of parts is stuck on a truck somewhere in Ohio, the financial hemorrhage of paying a factory full of workers to stand around doing nothing far exceeds the 5% premium they would have paid to a local supplier.
Oh, I see.
They are paying a higher unit price to guarantee the physical stability of their operation. Missing inventory is the ultimate margin killer.
Okay, that makes complete sense when you frame it around the cost of a halted assembly line. Certainty is worth a premium. So we're seeing this massive margin squeeze on the physical goods, the raw materials, the burgers, the logistics, but the trucks aren't driving themselves.
No, they're not.
The assembly lines don't run themselves. And that introduces a completely different, almost invisible cost to this whole equation, which is the people, moving the workforce.
Yeah, fuel volatility is rarely discussed as a human resources problem, but it is one of the most profound HR challenges a business can face. Gas prices dictate employee behavior in very predictable, very measurable ways.
Because for a worker with a long commute, a spike in gas prices isn't just an inconvenience, it is a direct, immediate pay cut.
Absolutely.
If it costs you $20 more a day just to drive to your shift and you're working 5 days a week, that is $100 vanishing from your paycheck before you even clock in.
And that leads directly to intense wage pressure.
Right.
Employees realize their net income is shrinking, so they go to their employers and demand pay raises simply to compensate for the cost of physically getting to the building.
Right.
The business, which we just established, is already struggling with higher supply costs, is now facing higher payroll demand simultaneously.
And the source mentions a few adaptations here, right? Like firms offering fuel stipends or flexible scheduling or letting people work remotely to keep their staff happy and retain talent.
Yes.
Which is great if you work at a laptop. But what about the massive segment of the economy that cannot work from a laptop?
Yeah.
Like, what does this mean for retail or hospitality or healthcare? You can't exactly zoom in to stock a grocery shelf or pour a coffee.
No, you can't. And it is a profound vulnerability for those sectors. They require physical presence. You cannot offset that commuting cost with a virtual meeting.
Right.
So what happens in the service industry is that the financial burden of the commute seamlessly shifts from the individual's personal problem directly onto the employer's recruitment and retention strategy.
Because if the pay doesn't cover the gas, the employee just quits.
Exactly. Employee retention plummets. Why drive 20 miles to work at a retail store when you can work at a different retail store 3 miles from your house for the exact same hourly rate?
Yeah, that makes sense.
This creates a phenomenon where the geographic radius from which a business can draw its workforce physically shrinks.
This is a huge point. The gravity gets so heavy that it physically redraws the map of the local labor market.
Literally overnight, a business's 10-mile hiring radius becomes a 3-mile hiring radius. The available labor pool basically evaporates.
Wow.
Recruitment becomes incredibly difficult, especially in suburban or rural areas that lack robust public transportation. The business is faced with an impossible choice. They either have to raise hourly wages significantly to entice people to drive from further away, or they have to operate perpetually short-staffed.
Which means lower sales, worse customer service, burnout for the remaining employees, and the downward spiral just accelerates.
Yeah.
It is amazing how a global oil market fluctuation in another hemisphere directly dictates who actually shows up to stock the shelves at your neighborhood store.
It is a highly interconnected web, and when local supply chains, consumer spending habits, and workforce wages are all under intense simultaneous pressure, it triggers a massive structural evolution across the broader macroeconomy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
Because when you look at all these pressures combining, gas prices essentially act as the ultimate corporate stress test. It forces a business to look in the mirror. You can't just coast on a sloppy, spread-out, reactive business model anymore.
No, you can't.
The gravity is too strong. You have to evolve into a highly localized, tech-driven, ruthlessly efficient model just to survive the quarter.
That is exactly what the long-term adaptation looks like. The source details the strategic shifts businesses are forced to make when they realize high gas prices aren't just a temporary blip, but a permanent structural threat. We see massive capital investments in fuel-efficient vehicles. We see entire logistics networks beginning the really arduous transition to electric fleets, basically attempting to remove themselves from the fossil fuel roller coaster Entirely.
And it is not just upgrading the vehicles, right? It's changing where the businesses are physically putting themselves on the map.
Yes, physical relocation is a major multi-million-dollar strategy. Companies will spend heavily to relocate distribution centers, warehouses, or operational hubs closer to key markets and population centers.
So they're moving closer to the consumer.
Exactly. They are actively reevaluating their entire supply chain architecture to permanently cut transportation miles out of their equation.
They are essentially trying to shrink their physical footprint so the gravity doesn't affect them as much. But, as we zoom out to the highest macroeconomic picture, we have to acknowledge what happens when all these businesses, the ones surviving anyway, pass the remaining unavoidable costs onto you and me.
Right.
It contributes to broader systemic inflation across the entire economy.
It is unavoidable. I mean, if it costs more fuel to run the tractor to harvest the grain, and more fuel to move the grain to the mill, and more fuel to deliver the bread to the store, the bread has to cost more.
Right.
If it costs more to transport lumber, the new house costs more, the overall price level of everything rises.
Which steadily erodes the purchasing power of the average consumer.
Yeah.
Your dollar simply buys less than it did yesterday. And this is where the highest level of intervention occurs. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve, are forced to step in.
And their primary mandate is to maintain economic stability and control inflation. So, to cool off an economy that is running too hot with rising prices, central banks will adjust monetary policy.
Right.
And their primary tool for doing that is raising interest rates.
Let's break down exactly how that interest rate hike lands back on the desk of that local business owner we talked about earlier.
Sure. So when a central bank raises interest rates, it makes borrowing money more expensive across the entire economy. Let's go back to our food truck owner.
Okay, the guy with the thimble.
Exactly. Let's say he survived the initial gas spike. But to stay afloat, he needs to take out a small business loan to upgrade to a more fuel-efficient generator for his kitchen. Before the inflation hit, he might have gotten a loan at, say, a 5% interest rate.
But now, because the central bank is trying to cool down the inflation caused by the gas prices, he goes to the bank and they quote him a 9% interest rate.
Exactly. The cost of capital has surged. So now, this small business owner is squeezed by higher fuel costs at the pump, squeezed by higher wage demands from his employees who need gas money, and suddenly squeezed by higher interest rates on the very loans he needs to adapt his business.
Man.
It is a compounding, multi-directional pressure.
It is suffocating. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reality laid out in our source material is pretty stark. Businesses that are capable of proactive adaptation, the ones that leverage the data analytics to avoid the left turns, the ones that invest in electric fleets, the ones that shrink their hiring radiuses by paying better local wages, they can build a buffer.
Right.
They can navigate the gravity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yeah, they build resilience. But the companies that fail to respond, the ones that just hope prices go back down while operating the exact same way they did 10 years ago, they risk losing their profits entirely.
Yeah.
They will be outmaneuvered by their more efficient competitors, they will lose their staff, and they will ultimately be pushed out of the market.
It's basically economic natural selection, and the fuel pump is the apex predator. We have covered a lot of ground today, and I just want to quickly recap the journey we've taken.
It's in a journey.
It really has. We started by looking at a single drop of expensive fuel and watched it burn in a delivery truck, squeezing the margins of local businesses who couldn't bail the water fast enough. We watched that cost transfer to the restaurant menu, triggering a standoff with consumers whose wallets were already light.
Right, and we saw how it disrupted the very flow of inventory, creating those out-of-stock signs at the store and forcing manufacturers to pay premiums for local suppliers just to keep their assembly lines from grinding to a halt.
And we didn't just track the products, we tracked the people. We saw how a more expensive commute acts as a direct pay cut, shrinking the geographic hiring radius of retail stores and forcing employers into a corner. And finally, we followed that pressure all the way up the chain, watching it drive national inflation and force central banks to raise interest rates, which lands right back on the shoulders of the small business owner trying to get a loan.
It really requires a complete reframing of how we view a price fluctuation. It is never just an isolated event at the pump.
It is an ecosystem-wide event. And that is the true value we want you to walk away with today. The next time you're driving down the street and you pass a gas station and you see those big glowing numbers tick up by 20 or 30 cents, you aren't just looking at a mild annoyance anymore.
Right.
You now possess the blueprint to see exactly how that price changes actively in real time rewiring the businesses in your own neighborhood. You know why the menu changed, why the store is short-staffed, why the delivery is late, and why the local bank is charging more for a loan.
You are seeing the hidden mechanics of the economy at work right in front of you.
But before we let you go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about how the most adaptable businesses are aggressively investing in data analytics, regional hubs, and electric fleets to survive this volatility.
Yeah, that's their shield.
Right. So ponder this. If a massive corporation successfully leverages all that technology to completely decouple their logistics from gas dependency, could a future massive spike in oil prices actually become a strategic weapon?
Oh, wow. If you are immune to the gravity but your competitors are still weighed down by it, it becomes a massive competitive advantage.
Exactly. Could a global gas crisis tomorrow serve as an absolute extinction event for slower competitors, while the tech-forward, electrified companies barely even notice, just swooping in to take their market share?
That is a fascinating angle.
It completely flips the script on how we view an energy crisis. Food for thought the next time you look at the numbers on the pump. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.